Don't get me wrong, going to church is important. We are instructed from the Bible to meet up with others who are practicing the faith and to worship together, encourage each other and receive teaching and preaching. But in my experience of going to church, I've not heard many messages on this, and I've not seen the point of what I'm about to say being dwelt on as much as I think it needs to be, and that is the mind. So in my experience of going to churches, I've always heard about the mind obviously being important, in that it's the avenue that the enemy can influence you and to guard your thoughts and to stray away from things that are not edifying. So in that sense, yes, the church does talk a lot about the mind, but in the day-to-day management of a person's life and managing emotions and overcoming obstacles, I don't really hear many people talk about this. And where I have come to learn this information has been through my experience of being coached and going through coaching training. And that is that the mind, what we think about, ultimately determines the things that we do. Now hear me out, because that sounds very simple what I just said. But what I've come to learn, and something that I think we all do know on a subconscious level, but something that we don't always use to our ability, is that what we think about determines our feelings, and our feelings determines our actions, which then determine our outcomes. I don't hear churches talk much about this, but it's so true that what we think about really does affect the way that we feel about ourselves and ultimately what we go on to do. And I wish I had learnt this like 20 years ago when I'd left school and college. I wish I knew this then, because I feel that I made a lot of mistakes based on bad emotional decisions rather than rational decisions. And here's how this works in practice. So every day we have thousands of thoughts that go through our mind, some good, some bad. And depending on your personality, you might have more bad thoughts than good. But if that is you as a person, and this goes for everyone really, not just those who are negatively focused, but if you are someone who dwells on negative thoughts, which I think we all do, then you need to learn to train your mind to think on good things. And this is what the Bible talks about. So I'm just going to read Philippians 4 verse 8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Verse 9 says, those things which ye have both learned and received, and heard, and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. And I find that verse, those two verses, so that's Philippians 4 verse 8 and 9, to be two of the most overlooked verses in my opinion when it comes to human behaviour, because psychologists and counsellors and coaches understand this, that what we think about and reflect on, those are the things that either positively or negatively impact how we feel and how we operate. Most people, I don't believe, think about the connection between their thoughts and their overall behaviours. It's obvious that if you have a very negative thought, that's going to cause a bad pattern in your behaviour. Like, some things are quite obvious, but I'm talking about the subtle negative thoughts that we have that just occur on and off throughout the day. So it could be thoughts that you have about yourself. So if, for example, you don't think that you're someone who is very competent, for example, one of the thoughts that you might have is, oh, I keep making mistakes. I keep doing this wrong. Why do I keep making mistakes? Why can't I just be like such and such? Like, that is a negative thought pattern that you might have. And you've probably not learned how to, number one, identify it. And number two, redirect that thought. And redirecting your thoughts is something that I have learned to do through basically training myself. So these days, even though I have good and bad thoughts throughout the day, like most people, I can now see when I'm being particularly negative. I can feel the resistance in my body, and I can feel the change in my mood. And whereas before I thought I was helpless and I just had to allow those thoughts to take over because I had no kind of defense against them, now I know that I can actually consciously redirect those thoughts. And that is something that I think more churches need to teach on more intently. And I'm not saying the church needs to have all the answers or should have all the answers, because at the end of the day, churches are filled with human beings like you and I who make mistakes, and we all don't know everything. But I think there's enough verses in the Bible to back up the idea that we need to guard our minds diligently. We're not just knowing that we need to guard our minds, learning how to do it on a daily, consistent basis. Since making this video a couple of days ago, I was reminded of the verse in 2 Corinthians 10:5, which says, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. And it all starts with awareness, being aware of your negative thoughts, and then it comes down to redirecting those thoughts to something positive. So if you're always saying, oh, I make mistakes, you can look at it from a different perspective. Instead of saying, I'm always making mistakes, you can say, I'm a human being like anybody else, and sometimes I make mistakes, and other times I make great decisions, like the time when, insert example of when you made a good decision. Taking every thought captive is an action. It's not a passive thing. It's an active thing where you have to physically think about that thought and decide to cast it away by focusing on something else. Whereas I think most people think that if a thought comes in about their character, that it's somehow true. Well, we don't have to accept every thought. Some thoughts are obvious that you have to reject them because they are obviously wrong, but those subtle thoughts that creep in, that change your perspective of who you are as someone who's created in the image of the Creator, those thoughts that put you down and that make you feel fear and that make you feel anxiety and that make you feel inferior, those are the types of thoughts that I'm talking about. Those thoughts that make you feel less capable as a person, not because you are less capable, but because you are allowing your mind to control your actions, and therefore you're giving into those negative thoughts. So pay attention to the thoughts that you're having, and if they're negatively impacting your feelings and behaviour, then you need to compare them to what Scripture says about you as a person and what the Creator believes about you. If it doesn't align, then it's a good sign to get rid of those thoughts and change it for an alternative perspective. And I think more people need to be aware of this and retrain their minds to act upon this. Because one of the pieces of advice I used to be given a lot in one of my previous churches was when I used to go through like difficult times and I speak to the pastor or elders, the advice was just trust in God, trust Jesus. And I've since learned that yes, we do need to trust in the Most High. We do need to trust that He is making a way for us, but He's also given us tools to use. And those tools are very important. And not only are they important, they're used by some of those in the highest professions, the highest realms of society, people who are trained in emotional intelligence and trained in services that deal with the emotions. They know this to be true and they train on these things, but for some reason in the church we overlook it and we kind of talk about it, but we don't focus on it enough, in my opinion. And I just wanted to put that out there, really, that the mind is really important. And if you're someone who deals with negativity, negative thoughts, negative emotions constantly, if you're always in a negative space, maybe consider the fact that part of the reason is that you're in a negative thought process a lot of the time. And if that is you, then I highly recommend you take some time out and throughout the day, even do a journal. Choose a day where you're going to pay attention to your thoughts, and you can either write those negative thoughts down, or in the moment when you feel your body tensing up and you feel the frustration, you feel the negativity, think about how you can redirect those thoughts. I'm Mawuena, and if you like this, please consider subscribing and share your thoughts in the comments below what you think. Take care.